So now for the grand finale, the sixth ingredient in the training scale. I want to discuss collection. All of the other ingredients, your rhythm, suppleness, connection, impulsion, straightness, all lead you to collection. And even if you're not a career dressage rider like my cohort here, Ruth Hogan-Polson, who's helping me with Moshi today, even if you're not a career dressage rider, riding your horse collected, or you can think of it as in self-carriage if collection is too dressage of a term for you, is a desirable quality for all horses, because a horse that's collected is simply more athletic and he can do his job better. Think about a jumping horse negotiating a course. The more athletic, the more off the forehand he is, the more maneuverable he is. So collection is a desirable quality for all horses. Now, I need to define collection because a lot of times I find there's confusion about collection because people only look at one thing. And there are three things that I want you to evaluate as far as telling whether a horse is truly collected or not. The first thing, which most people can recognize, is the frame of the horse from tail to poll, the length of the horse. With the horse in the more basic levels of training in first level, the horse is longer in inches. And as we go up through the levels, the horse becomes what we call more packaged and becomes a shorter horse from poll to tail. So that's one of the criterion for collection. Unfortunately, you can shorten a horse without collecting him, and you do that in a bad way simply by hand riding and shortening the horse's neck and bringing his neck in. So simply the length of the horse's body, the packaging of the horse's body, is not enough for you to know whether you're riding a horse that's truly collected or a horse that's just short because you've ridden him from front to back. So we have two other criteria that we can use to tell whether the horse is truly collected or not. One of these criterion is the loading of the hind legs, the shifting of the center of gravity toward the hind legs. Now I want you to look at Moshi and think about any horse. If you were to just look at the horse from here back, the horse basically looks like a table with a leg in each corner. And as a table with a leg in each corner, he has 50% of his weight on his front legs and 50% of his weight on his hind legs. Perfectly balanced horse. Unfortunately, the horse has this appendage, this thing, on the end of his perfectly balanced table. And this appendage is called a head and a neck. And it's by virtue of the horse's head and neck, which can weigh up to 250 pounds, that in nature the horse's balance is more on his front legs, more on the forehand than it is on the hind legs. And it's approximately 60% of his weight on his front legs and 40% of his weight on his hind legs. So I know that some horses are more built to do the job than others. But the truth is, if your horse has a head and a neck, and for your sake I hope he does, then your horse is built with more of his weight on his front legs than his hind legs, regardless of the breed or the conformation or whatever. So as we go up through the levels, as we do systematic training, I've discussed that through all of the sessions, that we do things in a systematic, progressive way, we ever so gradually shift that center of gravity toward the hind legs, and we load the hind legs. And if you can almost think about it, if we had two scales, like two bathroom scales, that could independently weigh how much weight's on the front legs and how much weight's on the hind legs, the training level horse, who's in what I call horizontal balance, where his top line is basically parallel to the ground, would have more weight on the front scale than on the back scale. Then the first level horse, by virtue of some of the exercises that the first level horse does, like your 10-meter circles and your leg yields and a little bit of counter canter, we have ever so slightly shifted the center of gravity back onto that rear scale, so that the horse has approximately 55% of his weight on his front legs and 45% behind. But you can see that he still has more weight on his front legs. So that's why we're still working in the working gaits at first level. We haven't yet truly collected the horse, but collection doesn't arrive full-blown out of thin air. it's a work in progress. So even though the first level horse only works in the working gaits, he is somewhat more collected than the training level horse. At second level, by virtue of the exercises in second level, like your shoulder in and your haunches in and your simple changes of lead, we shift that center of gravity back even more. And at second level, we begin what's called modest collection. And those scales would show at that point that the horse had 50% of his weight on his front legs and 50% of his weight on his hind legs. Then from third level on up through Grand Prix, by virtue of the movements and the exercises, I'll discuss all of that in a second, we finally have real collection, and the horse shows 3 gears in his gaits: collected, medium, and extended. Okay, so that's the second way that you can tell that a horse is collected. The first way is the packaging of the frame. The second way is a shifting of the center of gravity toward the hind legs, so we load the hind legs. And another thing, and I want you to watch this as Ruth rides Moshi, I want you to watch the relative height of his withers to the top of his croup. Okay, when a horse is collected, think about the back end first. We should always think about the back end. By virtue of the bending of the joints of the hind legs, the croup goes down. And think about it like a seesaw. As the croup goes down, his withers go up. So you can truly tell if a horse has been ridden from behind and collected from behind and not just cranked in, regardless of the packaging of the horse, when you look at the height of his withers as opposed to the top of his croup. There is no way that the croup will be lower than the withers if you haven't engaged the hind legs. Now this will be really, really interesting for you to watch with Moshi, because you can see, as a Frisian, by nature, his conformation is that he has high hips and a low back. But you'll see with Ruth's very talented, clever riding, she will get him to lower his croup, so the top of his croup will be lower than his withers. So those are the 3 criteria for you to evaluate whether your horse is truly collected: the shortening of the frame, the loading of the hind legs, and the relative height of the withers to the top of the hindquarters. Now basically we can do, it's not mysterious, there are 4 things that we can do in order to achieve this goal of collection, as long as we have our first 5 ingredients in the training scale in order. And the 4 things that we can basically do, the most simplest, are decreasing size circles. In other words, as long as your horse stays straight, meaning that he doesn't avoid the engagement of his inside leg by either swinging his hindquarters in or swinging his hindquarters out, as long as he stays straight, meaning his spine directly overlaps the arc of the circle, his line of travel, then an 18-meter circle collects a horse more than a 20-meter circle. And a 16-meter circle would collect him more than 18, and so on. So as the circle gets tighter, as long as your horse stays overlapping the arc of the circle, there's an increase in the demands of the bending of the joints of the inside hind leg. And like I said, as the horse engages and bends those joints, his butt goes down and his front end comes up. So that's the simplest thing that we can do. We also have a second category of lateral exercises. Our first category of lateral exercises included turn on the forehand and leg yields. This more advanced group of lateral exercises, shoulder in, haunches in, half pass, have an ingredient that creates engagement, and that ingredient can be summed up in one word: bend. So when your horse bends as he's going sideways, it forces him to bend the joints of the inside hind leg, and he lowers his inside hip with every stride. So that's a second thing you can do, the advanced lateral exercises, like shoulder in, haunches in, half pass, walk pirouettes, canter pirouettes. Any of the sideways work that has a bend collects the horse. Another thing we can do are frequent transitions, skipping a gait. Now the key words there are frequent and skip. So for example, 5 strides walk, 5 strides canter, 5 strides walk, 5 strides canter, with no dribbly trot steps in between, will collect the canter. Trot 5 steps, halt. Trot 5 or 6 steps, halt, and then just ride your trot. Those frequent transitions with no dribbly walk steps in between will collect the trot, load the hind legs, lower the hindquarters, raise the front end. And the last thing that we can do to collect the horse are half halts. Now, in the session on connecting half halts, you saw one version of our generic half halt that we used to put the horse on the bit. And that was a long half halt that lasted about 3 seconds, the length of time it takes you to inhale and exhale. And if you remember, during that time you close both legs, you close your outer hand in a fist, and you keep the horse's neck straight with a little twinkle, twinkle, twinkle on the inside hand. For the collecting half halts, we combine the aids in a slightly different way. For the collecting half halt, we have a momentary closure of seat, leg, and hand, take, give. And rather than doing one long, slow half halt for 3 seconds, when we finally do ride the collecting half halts, we're going to do 3 short ones. So it'll be half halt, half halt, half halt. So if you remember from the connecting half halts, we taught the connecting half halts in 3 steps. First, we needed to know that the horse was in front of the leg and would go toward a medium when the rider closed her legs. Secondly, we needed to know that the horse would go forward through a closed hand and didn't see that the outside hand was a deterrent to going forward. And the third step was to ride the finished product connecting half halt. We have a way to teach the collecting half halt as well so that it's clear to the horse. And what we're going to do, I'm going to call them full halts, but they're actually just full down transitions. We're going to take each of the gaits and ride some full down transitions. For example, we'll do trot, 3 steps walk, and then trot again. We'll do that several times. And in the canter, we'll do canter, come to the walk for 5 strides, go back to the canter, come to the walk. And then when we're ready to ride the collecting half halts, the goal is to decrease the amount of ground covered with each stride by about 50%, but keeping the same rhythm and tempo. There's a big difference between short strides and collected strides. One way for you to think about it is if the length of my stride in a working gait was about like this, and it took me X amount of calories to walk with a length of stride like that. It took me that amount of energy, and I were to decrease the length of my stride by 50%, you can tell that this takes me less energy than that. But if you decrease the amount of ground covered by 50%, maintaining the same activity, the energy goes up. So rather than just taking a shorter step, it's a shorter, higher step. And you can see that this takes me as much energy as that. So that's what we want to think about. We want to think about that when we decrease the amount of ground by 50%, that the rhythm and the tempo and the activity stays the same. Now, until a horse gets strong enough to do that, because that you can think about that as doing a deep knee bend, he's going to try to get labored and a little slow in his tempo. And that's the rider's job, to try to keep the rhythm and the tempo and the degree of activity the same as she decreases the length of stride by about 50%. So we're going to demonstrate that in a second, but Moshe's been standing here for a while, so we're going to take a little break and give Ruth a chance to warm up, and then we'll be back shortly. So Ruth has had a little bit of time now to warm Moshe up, and now we're going to start teaching him those collecting half halts through full halts, or full down transitions actually. And first we'll attempt to collect the trot by going trot, 3 steps walk, trot, 3 steps walk. And what she wants to think and wants to feel is that as she does the down transition, he lowers his hindquarters and shifts the center of gravity toward the hind legs. So this lays a precedent for him doing that when she gives the short little collecting half halts, take, give, take, give, take, give. So go ahead, Ruth, start some transitions. So they're not actually halts, but they're full down transitions for just a couple of strides where the center of gravity comes back, but he's hot enough off her leg to go forward to the trot again. Well done. So just do a few of those to give him the idea. So he shifts back, very nice, into the walk, and he's hot off your leg going forward again. So he's still thinking forward even in the down transition. That's what we need to know, that it's never a subtraction. It's always an addition of hind legs. So Moshi always thinks forward even when he's doing the down transition. Good. So when you feel ready, Ruth, do some 3 or 4 collecting half halts. So think about bringing him to the walk, but just decrease the amount of ground you cover by about 50%. Good, good. Striving to keep the same rhythm and tempo. And as I mentioned, it's normal for the horse to want to get a little bit slow in his tempo like that. That's better, because we're asking him to do deep knee bends, to bring his hind legs closer to the front legs and to bend his hind legs and lower his croup. Now you can bring him back even a little bit more this next time. So the half halts are take, give, lower the croup, bring him back. There you go, there you go, there you go. Super, that was it. And try it in that same spot once more so that we can really see from behind how he lowers his croup. So we're going to decrease the amount of ground covered. Good. And he bends the hind legs. Bend, bend. Super. Yeah. Trying to keep the same rhythm and tempo. Good. One more time and then he gets a break. Just once more. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Rhythm, tempo, rhythm, tempo, rhythm, tempo. Good. And forward again. Good. Now walk for a second. And I want you to see the culmination of the collecting half halts. We can, of course, first teach those collecting half halts on a single track like that. And then your next job would be, as you ride the movements, which we're not getting to in this session, such as shoulder in and haunches in and half pass, to superimpose 3 or 4 steps, more collected steps with your collecting half halts, so that your horse learns not only to do the movement, but to shift his weight back to the hind legs as he's doing the movement. And the culmination, the most collected thing that we can do in the trot is piaffe. And Ruth is going to ask Moshi to do a piaffe now. We're going to see if he can bring his hind legs underneath, bend the joints of the hind legs, lower his croup. He has to have a little break first. And this will be our finished product of what those collecting half halts lead up to. Yep. Yeah, watch his hind legs. Super, 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 super. Yeah, you can walk for a second and do that a couple more times. That's awesome. Very good. So what you're watching is the bending of the joints of the hind legs, the lowering of the croup, and the lifting of the forehand. Good, 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 good. Yeah, 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 yeah. Ah, good, good, good. Super. Good. And that's very good. You can walk and pet him. That's what your collecting half halts in the trot are eventually going to turn into. The horse develops his ability, his strength, and his understanding of bending the joints of the hind legs so that he can lower his croup and the forehand will come up. So now we're going to teach Moshi collecting half halts in the canter by doing frequent transitions, canter, walk, with the same idea in mind, that as you bring him to the walk, he shifts his center of gravity back, but he's hot enough off the leg to go immediately back into the canter. And the goal is to do the walk, canter, walk with no dribbly trot steps in between. That's a nice canter. Good. And walk. Beautiful. That was lovely. And canter. Don't go too many strides in the walk. Good. Not too many strides in the canter. Remember, frequent transitions, skipping a gait. Beautiful. So there's no trot on the way up and no trot on the way down. Good. Lovely. Good. Good. Very nice. And then just ride collected canter now so we can see that. By nature, a Frisian is built with his hind legs out behind, and they're not bred to canter. But by closing him up the way she has with her half halts, you can see how much he brings his hind legs underneath him. Now the culmination, the most collected thing we do in the canter, is a pirouette. So start on a working pirouette. Watch the hind legs, everybody. She's going to do a haunches in on a small circle. Yeah, and decrease that only as much as she can, keeping the same rhythm and tempo. And we're watching, very good, super. The hind legs bend, the croup go down, and the withers go up, and that was super. And out and pet him. That was awesome. Walk and make a big fuss. Beautiful. Okay, so you can bring him up here and just let him relax. That was a lovely demonstration of how to introduce your collecting half halts in both gaits, both the trot and the canter. And you introduce the collecting half halts, that momentary closure of seat, leg, and hand, take, give, by doing frequent full down transitions so that the horse gets the idea of loading the hind legs on the down transition, but he's still thinking forward even in the down transition, so he's hot off your leg for the up transition. Once he understands how to do those full transitions, skipping a gait very nicely like that, then we ask for collecting half halt. So for 3 or 4 strides at a time with that momentary closure of seat, leg, and hand, we reduce the amount of ground that the horse covers per stride by about 50% while maintaining the same rhythm and tempo. And that's the beginning of shifting the center of gravity back. That starts, like I said, at second level with modest collection, but culminates in what you saw at Grand Prix, where the horse in the trot can actually trot on the spot. That's called piaffe. And in the canter, the most deep knee bending exercise that he does is a canter pirouette. So that was awesome, and thank you for helping us with that.
You're welcome. Very welcome.
Hey, don't touch that dial. In reviewing this tape on collecting half halts, I realized that I missed one of the little steps that I want to be sure that you catch when we were doing the collecting half halts in the canter. Yet Ruth did such an awesome job, I didn't want to erase anything that she did, so I'm just going to add on this little piece at the end. We talked about different ways to collect the horse, and she did show that with her full down transitions, frequent transitions, skipping a gait. She showed that in both the trot and in the canter. And that is one of the ways that we collect the horse. We ride the gait, we see what the balance of the horse is, and we do frequent transitions, skipping a gait, and then ride the gait again and see if the balance has changed. Now she did that, but that is one of the ways that we also start to develop the collecting half halts, which is the theme of this session. In other words, we do full down transitions, and then we do half a down transition or a half halt. And when we do these collecting half halts, we're doing 3 little half halts. If you remember, both seat bones, both legs, both reins, take, give, and our job is to decrease the amount of ground cover that the horse covers with each stride by about 50% while, here's the big deal, while keeping the same rhythm, the same tempo, and the same degree of activity. And Ruth showed that beautifully in the trot. She showed the full down transitions, then she showed the collecting half halts in the trot, and then she showed the culmination of those collecting half halts, which was piaffe. Now in the canter, we showed the frequent transitions, skipping a gait, which is one of the ways that we collect the canter. And you saw at the finish of that just how collected Moshi's canter was, and the culmination of that was that she could turn onto a pirouette. But I don't want to skip any steps. You know me, everything has to be systematic. So even though you can collect the horse, that is one of the ways we collect the horse, by doing those frequent transitions, skipping a gait, that is also the way that we teach the horse the collecting half halts. So we do those full down transitions, and then we do half halts, collecting half halts. And if you give your momentary closure of seat, leg, and hand, and your horse ignores you, then you just turn those collecting half halts into full halts or full down transitions. And so that way you explain to the horse that he should maintain his rhythm, his tempo, his activity, but decrease the amount of ground covered. So in a second I'm going to warm Moshi up a little bit, and since we did miss that part in the canter, I'm just going to do a couple of transitions, canter, walk, walk, canter, to basically, I'll call that full halts, even though we're not going to halt, we're going to walk, and then I will attempt to do some of the collecting half halts, where we canter, fairly ground covering, and then for 3 or 4 strides, decrease the amount of ground covered by 50%. So I'll be back in a second after I warm Moshi up. So now I'm just going to do a couple of very frequent transitions, canter, walk, walk, canter, in preparation for the collecting half halts. And we'll see how that goes. My goal is to not have any dribbly trot steps on either the up or the down transition. That was better. Now from there, I'll try the collecting half halts. Good boy. So for 3 strides, I shorten the amount of ground he covers. You need a little help to keep his tempo up that time. Good, good, good. Good, good, good. Tempo. There. Back and forth, a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, the strides. Good, good. Collecting. Give, take, give, take, give. I want him to come back even a little more now. Good, 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 good. Good boy, Mosh. Good, good, good. And from there, walk. So that's the little piece that I left out, and I always like to dot all my I's and cross all my T's. And although we could have left the lesson the way we did, because the frequent transition, skipping a gait in the canter is one of the ways we do collect the horse, and you did see collected canter after that. But the point of this whole session was to show you how you develop the collecting half halts, that momentary closure of seat, leg, and hand, where you shorten the amount of ground covered while keeping the same rhythm, tempo, and activity. And we teach the horse those collecting half halts by using those full down transitions.